Without spoiling anything plot-wise, Nine Souls presents itself as an entry in the ever-growing Metroidvania FromSoft-like canon of games that champions the theme of accepting failure. It wants, and succeeds, at giving you ample opportunity to fail. And while I didn't necessarily feel like its form completely matched its message, I can't deny that by the time I rolled credits, I was quite familiar with failure. Nine Souls makes its mark on the genre by presenting a side-scrolling Sekiro-like that relies heavily on high-precision gameplay to stand out amongst what is becoming quite a crowd. And while I was always quite satisfied by my wins against the game's many challenging bosses, I frequently encountered minor design aspects that ultimately frustrated an already patience-testing experience. Nine Souls does a great job of maintaining the show don't tell and piecemeal doling out of information about the world that games like this have become known for. But it also knows when to let the gates open a bit and really let the player sink their teeth into the narrative, its consequences, and the main actors in its drama. I deeply appreciated that the game's protagonist Yi not only has a personality and multiple motives for what he's trying to do, but has a complex emotional backstory that really sets a three-dimensional character at the center of the events unfolding. Aiding this character-driven story is a wonderful art style that mixes manhua panels with slick animation. The game also makes an attempt at balancing the utterly brutal and excessively violent world with moments of levity and cuteness. This is Shan Shan. Shan Shan is a good boy and is very important to me. If anything happens to Shan Shan, I would kill everyone in this precinct and then myself. That said, this balance doesn't always work, and there are moments in Nine Souls that definitely pushed the envelope of body horror and disturbing cruelty. Now for some gripes. Is it a skill issue, or is it frustrating design? There's no doubt a skill issue is involved, but I am not entirely convinced it's not designed as well. I found the parrying, which Nine Souls heavily emphasizes in combat over the dodge, confusing and slightly unintuitive at first. I mention this because it is a barrier to entry, something that you have to adapt to in order to play the game. But more notably, whether in boss battles that are otherwise a showcase of the incredible finesse that Nine Souls is cutting its teeth on, or in regular mob enemies between boss battles, I encountered numerous strange and unexpected hitboxes. Some were surprisingly large, like with attacks that seemed to hit entirely outside of the animation. Others, like with large enemy models, were layered in ways that I found difficult to read in the 2D environment. None of this was insurmountable, and it can be argued that this is just another aspect of the game's intentionally difficult design. I can accept that. But if that's the case, it still speaks to a design philosophy that many will find quite hindering or exhausting, even if they have a dozen other Soulsborne and Sekiro-style games under their belt like I do. When Nine Souls is at its best, the boss battles feel like you're participating in a choreographed dance. Initially chaotic, with practice everything falls into line with strict timing, responses, and outcomes. There are some really memorable fights as a result, including this boss fight that is an absolute standout. Beating fights like this gave me the satisfaction of feeling like I just watched a perfectly executed fight scene in a movie, except I was the stuntman. and the sound design that accompanies it has given my brain 2 new Pavlovian responses. This will forever make me feel great. And this will forever haunt my nightmares. While the skill tree requires basically no hard choices in terms of where you invest and can just be filled in at your leisure, the equipable jades, talismans, and arrows that Yi utilizes allows for some fun build crafting that can make a huge difference. Without doing too much dedicated exploring to collect them all, I found a build that saw me through to the end of the game pretty naturally, and it proved to match up with most of the endgame builds I was seeing online for the final fight. Which is to say, there is room for customization, but the builds do feel fairly solved at this point since the game's initial launch. Nine Souls feels like a game made with veterans of the genre in mind, and it really seeks to put itself up on the pantheon alongside, and I've waited the whole video to say this, Hollow Knight. I mean, look at the symbol for the dash in the game. This is almost as obvious a ripoff, homage, as the first Descendant copying icon assets from Destiny 2. At the end of the day, Nine Souls will appeal to those looking for another action combat game with big set piece bosses that demand precision, finesse, and timing to succeed at. It will reward those who like to feel the sense of triumph that a palm-sweatingly difficult boss fight will give you. And at the same time, it won't win over anyone who wants something more accessible from their gaming experience. Nine Souls has a story mode, but at that point you may as well just watch the story on YouTube and save yourself the money. Elevated by interesting characters with multi-dimensional psychologies and delivering punishingly tuned boss fights, Nine Souls will delight and frustrate in equal measure, even if it never really teaches you to accept loss.